I am not, Ma. Don't you believe her?
You should. I ought to hear him talk to me. It ain't right, Ma.
Oswald, Annie, behave.
Will you cut that out?
Oh, am I crisp. Nobody can do anything around this house anymore since you've been home.
Here. What's going on here?
Oswald, he won't let me play the piano.
Well, I wouldn't mind if she played the piano, but I certainly object to what she's doing now.
Well, it's just as good as your singing.
Is that so?
Yes, that's so. I'm only a bird in a gilded cage, a pitiful sight to see.
Say, listen, do I have to stand for that?
Now, Annie, you leave your brother alone and stop teasing him.
Well, I think that Oswald ought to leave his sister alone.
Ever since he's been home, it's Jimmy and Bob, Jimmy and Bob,
Well-
Jimmy and Bob.
Well, now, Jimmy and Bob are two swell guys, and I ought to find them and give them that option.
Now, Oswald, I thought your father settled all that last night.
How can you find them, Oswald, if you haven't the slightest idea where they are?
Well...
Well, what?
Well, he's only a bird in a gilded cage.
Now, who's picking on who?
Annie, you behave yourself or I'll give you a spanking.
Mind your mother, Annie. Mind your mother.
Am I crisp or am I crisp?
You'll be crisper if you don't get out of here and let your brother alone.
Oswald, come over here to your dad. I want to talk to you.
What is it, Pa?
Ever since you've been back home, ever since you left Jimmy and Bob and came back to Santa Fe, you've been floundering around like a fish out of water. What's the matter?
Well, nothing's the matter.
Now, don't tell me that. I know you too well.
Is it the cooking? Don't you like Ma's cooking anymore?
Oh, gee, yes, Ma. That's swell.
Don't you like the ranch life anymore?
Oh, sure, yeah, that's all right.
Wouldn't you like to settle down and take over that new insurance business I bought the other day? I have to have somebody operate it for me.
No, Pa, I don't think I'd like the insurance business.
Why don't you start him in the restaurant business, Pa? Heaven knows he eats enough, and he ought to feel at home there.
I'm a music star, Pa, so we can sing.
But you get out of here, you little imp, before I box your ears. Go out and play.
All right, Ma. Can I practice my scales?
No, go out and play.
Is it Annie? Does she annoy you?
Well, she doesn't soothe my nerves any.
Well, you don't make me feel any too good either.
Annie, will you get out of here?
And do you like them apples? Toodaloo, Ossie, toodaloo.
Say, is she a Hofmeister or is she a Hofmeister?
Well, now that that's over, let's get back to the subject. Isn't it a fact, Oswald, that you're restless because you want to get out on the road again?
Yes. You want to gallivant around with Jimmy and Bob, selling gadgets to pull off tires with.
Well...
I thought I settled that yesterday. Now, outside of the fact that you like Jimmy and Bob, we'll admit they're a couple of nice fellows. Outside of that fact, what reason have you for this globe-trotting?
Well, Pa, you learn a lot of things. You learn history.
History. I never heard you manifest any particular interest in history while you were home.
Well, I know, Pa, but then there's the option.
Yes, there's the option. And now, history. So let's dispose of that first. Do you know that right here in Santa Fe, there's more history to the square foot than there is to the square mile in most places?
Well, no, Pa, I didn't.
Do you know that this little town that is the capital of New Mexico enjoys the distinction of being the oldest seat of government in the United States?
Well, no, Pa.
Can't you say anything but, well, no, Pa?
Well, yes, Ma.
And here's some more history for you. Do you know that this town of Santa Fe was permanently settled by Europeans about 1610 and antedates the landing of the Pilgrim Fathers by nearly a decade?
Well, is that interesting or is that interesting?
Certainly it's interesting.
And if it's interesting history you're looking for, take a stroll down the plaza and look over the Palace of the Governors that was the seat of government for more than 300 years.
Yeah, I certainly will, Pa.
And go over on College Street and look at the oldest church in the United States, old San Miguel Mission, built in 1636.
You know, I never thought of that.
And drive out and see the cliff dwellings and the Indian pueblos and Bandelier National Monument and petrified forests just 23 miles away.
There certainly is a lot to see.
Why, of course. Now that we've disposed of this matter of history, what do you think now of hitting the road?
Well, Pa, I still think I ought to find Jimmy and Bob.
What are you going to do with a boy like that, Herman? What are you going to do?
I've got an idea. Let's throw him in the lake.
If you don't get out of here, you little villain, I'll throw you in the kitchen sink.
You go out and play with Eddie Smith. And if you come in here without being called, I'll take a switch to you.
All right, Ma. Toodle-oo, Oswald.
Say, somebody ought to take that child in hand.
Yes, and somebody ought to take you in hand. You're as precocious as she is.
Oh, Pa, I'm not as bad as Annie.
You're just as unmanageable and unreasonable.
Oh, Ma.
I've pleaded with you. I've tried to bribe you. I've even threatened you. And you still persist in this idea of trying to find Jimmy and Bob.
Well, they're two swell guys, and I've got their option.
There's no mistake about that. We certainly have heard enough to convince us about that.
Well, I've heard enough. You'll never grow up, Oswald. You're just an obstinate...
Now, Herman, don't blame Oswald.
Why, of course I will. He's just like your father. A wanderer, a globetrotter. Why, I can still remember what your mother used to say, Martha.
You never forget anything that pertains to my parents.
She used to say that if your father ever stayed home long enough to take his hat off, it would be because he didn't have strength enough to put it on.
Are you insinuating?
No, it's just common knowledge, Martha.
I'll have you to understand, Herman Hofmeister, that my parents are people of refinement.
Well, I didn't say they weren't.
And my father was a man of high standing in this community.
Yeah, about 6 feet and 2 inches.
Well, if you insist on dragging in Oswald's grandparents, why not both sides of the family? What about your father? Did you ever know anyone in Santa Fe who wasted more time playing pinochle and leaning against brass rails?
I'll have you understand, Mrs. Hofmeister, that our family are highly respectable people.
That's all the more reason why you should not speak ill of my father.
All right, then. What about your grandfather?
Yes, what about my grandfather?
He was so stubborn that he visited your father and mother one time for 20 years just because he knew they didn't want him.
Listen to me, Herman Hofmeister. There's only one man in the world who could tell bigger lies than you, and that's your grandfather.
Mm-hmm. Say, do you realize that you call my grandfather a liar?
Now, listen, why don't you two come to an understanding?
Well, I've just been trying to tell your mother the reason that you are so stubborn. It's because you're like your grandfather.
Herman, that's enough.
It is not. Now, I settled this whole matter yesterday. Now, Oswald...
There's no use talking.
Why?
Well, I've made up my mind.
Oh, Oswald, dear, think of your mother. Think what it means to me when you're away, worrying every minute of the day when you don't write, wondering if anything has happened to you. The strain is just too much.
That's right, son. You have some thought for your mother.
Well, I'll tell you what I'll do.
What?
I'll think it over for a couple of weeks, and if you stop Annie from bothering me and let me spend a lot of time deciding this whole business, I'll make up my mind.
Well?
Well, that's fair enough.
All right, 2 weeks from today. I'll either settle down on the ranch for good and send Jimmy and Bob's option back to Elizabeth, or else...
Or else what, dear?
Oh, Ma, I can't say it.
Here. Put your arm around me and give me a great big kiss. That's the boy.
Martha, it's dinner time.
Yes, and we have frankfurters and sauerkraut.
Oh, boy, do I like sauerkraut or do I like sauerkraut?